What's going on, everybody? This is Cody, the home theater hobbyist, and today I finally had an opportunity to review an Outlaw audio product. This is the Model 7000X power amplifier. And I say finally because over the years you guys have been telling me, Cody, you need to review Outlaw audio amplifiers. And quite frankly, you were right. Okay, you're right. I really like this amplifier, especially for the price. It's a 7-channel amplifier that can output up to 130 watts per channel into 8-ohm speakers, all channels driven, or it can do up to 200 watts per channel, all channels driven into 4 ohms, and the price is only $9.99. There's also a 5-channel version known as the Model 5000X. It can output up to 120 watts per channel, all channels driven into 8-ohm speakers, and it costs $769. That is a really good deal for a nice piece of kit, okay? This is a really good deal. In fact, they have an even better deal. From now when I publish this up to November 29th, you get I think it's $150 off of purchases greater than $500 at outlawaudio.com. I'll put a link in the description below because they are having a 25-year anniversary sale. Okay, so yeah, they've been in business for 25 years doing the direct to consumer type thing. And I have to say again, I understand why you guys like their products. So I'm going to tell you about my experience with this. So let's just get to it. Like I said earlier, this box can support up to 7 channels or 7 speakers, whichever terminology you prefer. And the connections are aligned vertically like you can see here with the XLR connection up top, followed by an RCA connection. So if you have a surround processor with XLR, you can use this. But if you have an AV receiver with pre-out connections, you can use the RCA. Just below that is an XLR or RCA switch, so you can select whichever connection you have. And then just below that is a label for the channel. Right here, this is the right channel, and then over here is the left speaker. So they've kept these pretty far apart, which is good because you want to reduce the amount of electrical noise. And the center is here along with everything, labeled in between. Now below that are the speaker connections themselves, and this can accept all major speaker connections, including banana plugs, spade connections, and bare speaker wire. But I like these caps because they are nice and premium. All right, on this side of the box, you have the 12-volt trigger connection up top here. This is the cable that you're going to use to turn this box on along with your AV receiver. Now, you will need to do 2 things. First of all, you will need to put this switch, flip it from manual to trigger, so that way that works. And you will need to enable the main power switch here. So again, whenever your AV receiver or surround processor turns on, this automatically turns on with this as long as you have that trigger cable connected. You're in trigger mode, and you have the main power button selected there. And below that trigger connection is the chassis ground connection. If you happen to have a ground loop hum in your speakers, this is one of the things that you can try to get rid of that. Outlaw does provide several suggestions in their manual of things you could do, including connecting this to your AV receiver or surround processor. So that's nice to have. Now below that is that trigger manual switch that I mentioned before. And below that is the main power connection. The power cable that comes in the box is just over 6 feet, so it's nice and long. And then just below that is the user replaceable fuse. So some of you may be asking, why would you buy a power amplifier like this when you already have an AV receiver? It's already got amplifiers built in. There's no real need for something like this. Well, you're correct. There are amplifiers built into an AV receiver. An AV receiver is a nice hub. It sends the video signal onto your television or your projector, and it decodes the audio, it sends it onto its onboard amplifiers, and then sends that power onto your speaker so you can hear sound. It's a nice hub, but there are a couple of inherent disadvantages to this setup. The first one is the amount of electrical noise that can be built into this box if there isn't proper shielding. Because you're doing processing and amplification in the same box, some of that noise can actually get into the sound signal if things aren't properly shielded. So that's why a lot of people will actually separate the processing from the amplification. So that's the first reason. The second reason is power output, and I think this is actually the most important reason to have a box like this. AV receivers will quote a power output number. Maybe it's 110 watts. And if you look at the specs, that's 110 watts times 2 channels. So for 2 channels of power, it can deliver up to 110 watts. But you bought a 7-channel AV receiver. How much power can it deliver at 7 speakers? The question is, you don't know. Well, with a power amplifier like this, you do know, because this will output up to 130 watts per channel into 8-ohm speakers, all channels driven. So if for some reason there is a huge explosion in your particular movie and all of your speakers need 130 watts of power at the same time, they're 8-ohm speakers, this can deliver that power. Whereas your AV receiver just can't deliver that power. And what that really means is if it's playing really loud, you might notice some clipping of the sound signal because this just does not have the power output of a power amplifier. Now, I'm not going to talk about how to connect an AV receiver or surround processor to this amplifier because I've done that in another video, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. All right, now let's talk about my experience. And I set this up in my rack and I wanted to listen to my speakers. They are the Arendo Sound 1723S lineup. They are 4-ohm speakers and they're about 86 or so dB efficient. So they need a little bit of power to drive them, which is a good thing. And I have a 5.1.4 setup right now in my room. So I basically use this to power all my speakers, and I just didn't worry about a couple of the overheads because I really wanted to get what I could get out of this and compare it to my AV receiver, the Denon AVR-X4400H. And I chose that as a comparison because I think a lot of people will be moving from an AV receiver to something like this. And I really wanted to hear how it would sound with a lot of different movies and content, stuff like that. But I also compared it to my Monoprice Monolith 7-channel amplifier, which can output up to 200 watts per channel. But quite frankly, it's not really a fair comparison. Number one, because that actually has more power. And number two, it is actually quite a bit more expensive than this. This is, again, $9.99. I think that's like $18.99 right now at Monoprice. So they're really in two different price classes. But I will tell you this compares very favorably to that. So just so you know that. But once I got everything set up, first thing I noticed was a little bit of a ground loop hum in my speakers. So I unplugged the unit and plugged this into the same power strip as my AV receiver, and that eliminated that ground loop hum for me. But like I said earlier, Outlaw puts several different solutions in the manual that you can check out if you are experiencing a ground loop hum. But let's get back to my listening test with this and the Denon and also the Monoprice just a little bit. The first thing I did was I disabled my subwoofer and set my speakers to full range. That way the amplifier would be playing the entire frequency range just using its own power. And bass frequencies need actually a bit more power than your trebles and your highs and stuff like that. So it was nice to really use this. And what I noticed when I was watching Jurassic Park and you have the scene where you have the T-Rex and he's stomping around, bum, 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 at loud volumes, was this gives just a bit more detail to the sound compared to the Denon. There's just a bit more there. The soundscape is just a bit more three-dimensional, if you will, with this compared to the Denon because it just has oogles of power on tap. Now, when I moved over to the Monoprice, there was just a small step up. I mean, the smallest step. To be completely honest with you, I think this is adequate for pretty much all home theaters. You don't necessarily need to step up to that Monoprice Monolith 7-channel with 200 watts per channel. Unless you're just trying to make your ears bleed or something like that, then yeah, go that route. But this is honestly adequate for pretty much your normal home theaters. And it is a step up compared to a traditional AV receiver when you are really trying to use the power that you have on tap. Now, another thing that I noticed was I moved over to The Greatest Showman, and there's that scene where she's singing that song, You're Never Alone, and the audience begins clapping at the end. And what I noticed was that some of the audience members were a bit closer to the microphones than others. So again, there was still that three-dimensional depth sort of experience when you have the power on tap compared to my Denon AVR. I could hear it, don't get me wrong, I could hear it, but it was just more distinct having the additional power from this. All right, so all that being said, I'm going to play a quick audio sample so you can hear how this compares to my Denon AVR and the Monoprice Monolith 7-channel. Now, I'm only going to play one audio sample because everything that you're going to listen to is in 2 channels. So that's not really stressing any of this stuff, but you will get an idea of how this sounds compared to, 2 other amplifiers.
Like 2 magnets, we are drawn to each other. Just know how to push all my buttons. Moved out of town and I erased your number. Like 2 magnets, we are drawn to each other. You just know how to push all my buttons. Moved out of town and I erased your number. other. You just know how to push all my buttons. Moved out of town and I erased your number.
Okay, hopefully you enjoyed that audio sample and you can hear a little bit of difference between the two. I do think this has just a touch of a warm sound to it compared to my monoprice, but quite frankly, it's just a touch. It's just a touch, okay? I think this is very, very close to neutral. And honestly, I don't have any issues recommending this because this is a very, very nice power amplifier and it's more power than most people can really adequately use in their home theater at 130 watts per channel. I also really like it because of the price. At $9.99, I think this is a steal. You've got nice high quality speaker connections. You've got XLR and RCA connections there, and you've got the trigger function, which is basically everything that I have on my monoprice, which is nearly twice as expensive, but the speaker connections aren't nearly as nice. So this is a great, great value for a home theater power amplifier. So if you want to purchase this or anything else, please use those links in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you next time.